Hi, my name is Brian English, forum name on Wappler Hyperbytes, and in this module I'm going to show you how to create your initial subscription form. So at the moment we've got the pages that were originally created automatically by Wappler, an index page, that's your home page, and a layout page. And all I'm going to do just before I do anything more is I'm just going to give that page a little bit of content just so we can recognize what it is really. So I'm doing it in this case from the App Connect panel. On the right here, I'm right clicking and selecting the item that I want. I'm going to double click on where it says fancy display heading, and I'm going to just simply put here home page. Let's save that. That's purely for simple recognition, but what we need to do now is we need to create a layout page. Sorry, not a layout page, a registration page, a content page. So over here in our site manager, pages is our content page, layout obviously is layouts, and partials is, if you haven't come across partials before in Node, you can think of them a little bit like a server-side include that we'd use an HTML page or a PHP include. And we'll be dealing with partials later, but for it, let's keep this simple. We're in our pages section and we're going to create a page, and we're just going to call that register. So it's a content page using the layout main. Can put an optional description in there. I tend not to bother unless there's a particular reason, but that's a matter of preference, and we hit save. Now the beauty of doing it from the pages as opposed to the files section is that if you do it from the pages section and you have a look at routing, it automatically creates the page route for you that we will be needing for all of the internal links within our web application. So we have our register page, absolutely nothing on it. And what I'm going to do first, I'm going to use what's called a block. That is basically a pre-written page which Wappler offers you. I'll be honest, some of them are really great, some of them I'm not wild on in terms of a structure, and this particular one I'm going to use is one I'm not wild on the structure of, but we can very quickly tweak that. So what I've done is I've gone into app with absolutely nothing there in this particular case, because some of these are context specific to an empty app or an empty container. Some specifically will need a row to be able to place the block into. You've got to sort of play about a little bit to see which is the required one. So I've started at blank, we're going down to forms, and we're going to pick a register extended form. There's our form, nice and simple. Few things that I'm going to change because I'm not happy with or they don't fit our structure. First one is company name. We're not going to be dealing with company names, we're going to be dealing with personal names. So I've just selected the row in which that particular input is, and first of all I'm just going to duplicate it. And now we need to rename them to match the fields within our users table. So our first one is obviously, it's not going to be company, it's going to be first name, and you need that to match exactly the name within the field. For convenience, technically you can get around that. You can just use a different name, and then when you create a server action you correct it, but it's much easier if you just match them right from the start. Our second one is going to be our last name, and to say these are the field input, the input names that we're dealing with here. And obviously we need to change the placeholder. That is the text that you'll see within these, the prompts shall we call them. Again, first name and last name. Starting to come together a little better now. So we've got our first name, last name. Email is great because email is the field name that we're using. Password, again, that's great. It matches the password that we are using. Notice that's been set to type password. And by doing that, it means that as you type into it, asterisks will appear as opposed to the letters, so it gives a degree of privacy. Then we have a confirmation field, and I'll show you how to make sure that these two fields match. Then we have a terms and conditions link, which people will have to sign up, and then lastly a button. And this is all the structural things that are unhappy about. That button really should be in a separate row in my opinion. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add after a row, and I'm going to create a column. I'm going to just reveal that button, and I'm just going to drag that button into that column there. It's got no color to it, so let's add a bit of style. Let's make it a blue button, and it needs to be a submit button. It's always worth checking with these blocks that the button types are set correctly. And at the moment that will do, and let's just change that. Instead of saying submit, we'll change that button name to register. So we're getting there now. I'm just going to hit Control S and save there. Okay, mentioned the DOM panel earlier. That's this section over here. And if we look at these entries within the DOM panel, we'll see that they all have a unique name. And if we're looking at the objects within our table, this, for example, input email form control, that's great. But up here I see we've got something imp company, and these are the unique IDs that are allocated to your particular object within your form, and we need to give these a unique and meaningful name as well, so we can recognize which object we're dealing with within the document object model. That's really easy to do. We just simply pop back into app structure, and when you look, you'll see there's an ID here. We need to match those IDs so that we can understand what they are. So we're giving it forename. So these don't have to be exact matches to these. This is a completely different section. This is the document object model. Another way you can do is just to literally copy and paste the last name, and then I'd like to leave a prefix. I use IN or INP. I'll just correct that because really that shouldn't be forename. We're using the term first name. So now if we went to that DOM panel, we can see now that it's imp first name. So we know that we're dealing within the document object model there, that we're dealing with the input for first name form control. So that's the purpose of your IDs, and IDs will become more and more important as we continue through. So let's look now at a little bit of validation. Well, we want a name, so I'm going to make that required. We want a last name, so again into our validation rules, and we will make that required. Email, that's obviously got to be required because that's really important. That's our login, but let's also make sure that it is a valid structure for an email address, and we do that simply by clicking on email. So now if the structure of whatever's typed into this box does not match the structure of an email, then it will be rejected by the form on validation. Password, well, I'm not going to be too strict with passwords at this stage. Obviously it's required, and we also need to look at making it, let's say, a minimum length of 8 characters. And lastly, I also like to say no white space, so we don't have spaces in the passwords as well. And that's our validation for that. So we got a confirmation box. We need to make sure that this box matches that box. Again, very simple, as a validation rule in there. That must be equal to the password field. Straightforward enough. And lastly, we must insist that they agree with the terms and conditions. All we're going to do is insist that they tick that box, so that is required. Let's save that. So pretty much there now in terms of creating this form. So one thing that we have got is we'll have a link here to terms and conditions, but we don't have any terms and conditions defined yet. But I would like to just create at least the page so we can get that link right. So again, we're just going to go to create page. Let's call it terms and conditions. Content page, layout is main. Let's pick our, so it's going to be easier, I think. It's just a little glitch there, I think. Container, our row, our column, and lastly a heading. And we'll just call this terms and conditions. So we'll be coming back to these pages at a later stage and populating the pages properly. But I want to do that just purely so in this register you can see we have a link here. That link will link to, and notice there I don't search in a folder for a page, I search for a root, and we're going for the terms and conditions root there. And this is internal link. Internal being think of basically means that we do not need to change the layout structure, which means that the layout page will not be reloaded from the server. The content page will simply be switched from the internals of it. But I'm also going to do something else, because when I click terms and conditions, I don't want them to be taken away from this register page completely, because they may well be halfway through or even completed the full form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into target, and we're going to say target is blank. And what that will do is that means if someone clicks that link will open in another tab within their browser, so that they will maintain whatever they've typed in this particular page here. Right, so that's saved our page now. We've created our registration page, and in the next module I'll be creating the server action which will be required to perform that registration action.